Hi bakers! Today I will be baking country white bread. This is a great all-purpose bread and great for a beginner. This slightly sweet white bread makes great thick toast and will make the best French toast and grilled cheese you've ever tasted. Even though this is an all-purpose bread, the nooks and crannies that make this a great toasting bread might not be the most ideal bread for cold sandwiches. In a few weeks, I will be making a video about how to make the most perfect cold sandwich bread, also known as a Pullman loaf. Mastering this recipe and the Pullman loaf recipe will fulfill a lot of your family's daily bread needs. This is everything that you will need to make the country white bread. 938 grams of flour. This can either be bread flour or all-purpose flour. 1 1/2 cup of milk. 165 grams of white sugar. 14 grams of yeast. 2 large eggs. 113 grams of softened unsalted butter. 12 grams of table salt. I will leave the cup measures in the description below. You will need 1/2 cup of warm water to bloom your yeast. This water will need to be between 110 and 115 degrees. Blooming is the process whereas active dry yeast is made ready to be used in a recipe. Blooming is not necessary when using fresh or instant yeast, but still include the 1/2 cup of warm water in your recipe. I always sprinkle a little sugar in my blooming yeast. Sugar and starches is what your yeast feeds off of. If your sugar, water, and yeast mixture does not look like this within 10 minutes, I regret to tell you it's dead and you're going to need to go out and buy yourself some new yeast. Heat your milk on the stove or in the microwave until barely warm. You want it warm enough that it's going to melt your softened butter completely and dissolve your sugar. This will take between 3 and 5 minutes. You don't want it to boil. Once your milk is warm, take it off the heat and add your softened butter and sugar. Stir well. Hopefully you'll do it neater than I did here. Once you have your butter and sugar all dissolved and melted into your warm milk, you will need to cool it down between 110 and 115 degrees. This is the perfect temperature for yeast. Anything above that could kill the yeast. Anything below that could retard the growth. After a while making bread, you won't need a thermometer to judge the temperature. It's about the temperature of a warmed up baby bottle. Once your mixture has reached the proper temperature, add your 2 large eggs. Once your eggs are mixed in, you can add your bloomed yeast. Once your yeast is added, be sure and mix well. You can now start adding your flour. I like to add about 3 cups of flour and then I will add the salt. Using salt and yeast together is a matter of balance. Salt will retard yeast growth and in high concentration can indeed kill yeast. But at the same time, salt adds a lot of flavor to the bread and controls yeast growth so that the resulting crumb is going to be nice and even. I like to use my paddle attachments until I notice the machine is starting to struggle, and then I will change to my dough hook. I will knead the dough in the mixer between 5 to 8 minutes. I will always knead the dough by hand for about a minute or so. This helps me check the consistency of the dough to make sure it's right. Making your own bread may seem a little intimidating at first, but I hope my video helped you to understand the science and the steps behind it. And bread can be very forgiving and so satisfying to make. I hope you try it. Once your bread is nice and smooth, put in a greased bowl to rise in a warm spot for about an hour to an hour and a half. Cover the dough with either cling wrap or a clean towel. You are looking for your dough to be double in size. Once your dough is double in size, turn the dough out onto a clean work surface. Push all the air out of the dough. This is called punching it down. This recipe makes 2 large loaves of bread, or about 30 dinner rolls. I made 1 loaf of bread and about 15 dinner rolls. Now it's time to get your bread ready and shaped for the loaf pan. There's a couple different ways to shape a loaf of bread for a loaf pan. If you're not comfortable doing it the way I'm doing it here, if you're a beginning bread baker, then you can also roll it out, then roll it up and pinch the bottom seam. There's some great resources online that will show you how to do this. So this recipe makes a large loaf of bread. This is a 9x5 loaf pan. The standard American loaf pan is an 8x4, so just be careful what you're using. You can certainly use the 8x4, but you'll probably get 2 loaves of bread and a couple dinner rolls instead of 2 loaves of bread. And you also have to adjust the time it takes to bake. Whatever pan size you end up using, just be sure you grease it well. Now to shape the dinner rolls. These dinner rolls are not going to win any beauty contest, but they're absolutely delicious. They kind of have an Annie Ann's pretzel thing going on. They're salty, they're buttery, they're a little sweet. You cannot eat only one of them, I promise you. Shaping good tight dinner rolls does take a little practice, but you can also look up on the internet and there's some great resources of different ways to shape dinner rolls. This dough is very forgiving, and even if you can't shape your dinner rolls really tight because you're new at doing it, this dough rarely has a quote-unquote blowout where it really misshapens the dinner roll. What makes these dinner rolls truly delicious and decadent is a stick of salted butter. So what I do is I paint the parchment paper with a little butter, and then I dip each ball of dough, submerging the whole thing in butter. I then put the little buttery balls of goodness about 1 inch to 1.5 inches apart on a sheet pan. Let the rolls and the loaf of bread rise until about double in size. This takes about an hour to an hour and a half. For the rolls, right before I put them in the oven, I paint them once again with a little salted butter. You're going to bake the rolls and the bread at 350 degrees. The rolls take about 15 to 20 minutes, and the bread takes about 20 to 25 minutes. Be sure once the rolls and the bread come out of the oven, you cool them on a wire rack. Don't cool them in the pan, it'll just give them a sweaty bottom, and nobody likes a sweaty bottom. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed my country white bread video and you're going to give bread baking a try. Please also like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments. Thanks so much. Happy baking!